On Board Games, episode 161, Emergent Gameplay.
You are listening to On Board Games, where game industry veterans talk about the board and card gaming hobby while exploring topics of interest to gamers, designers, and publishers.
On Board Games, episode 161, Emergent Gameplay. In this episode, Erik and Don are joined by David Cott and Ben Draper to talk about emergence in gameplay. In the Review of Palooza, Erik and Don take a look at Pigskin, Roll for the Galaxy, Dark Moon, Thunder Alley, and Flux. On Board Games is sponsored by Second Rat Games, but most importantly by our Patreons at patreon.com/OBG. Your patronage really helps this show, and we really appreciate it. Thanks.
This podcast is a proud member of the Dice Tower Network. If you like this show, we probably have another one that's right up your alley. Check them out at dicetower.com.
Nice. Erik?
You know, I got a box in the mail from Royce from Roar Art Games. He's got a Kickstarter coming out in July called Pigskin, which is a 1-to-4 player, mostly a 1-to-2 player football card game. That's quite a bit of fun. And I got to tell you, I opened up the box. There's some drawings on the side of a football player, and right on the little letter he wrote, it said, "Read first." He drew a quick picture of Malcolm Reynolds with a football saying, "You can't take the ball from me," and then wrote a letter real quick about the game and talking about why he was sending it to me. And I was like, you know, if you want to grab my attention, this is the way to do it, because it shows that you've actually listened to the episode or listened to the show, right. As opposed to, "Dear podcast, we like your show. We've got a book about, you know, chess that we think would be good on it." So I've been playing that. It's
are you going to give us a full review on that later in the episode?
Yes, I am indeed. But it's a fun game, but I wanted to definitely say that if you're, you know, kickstarting a game and you want to send it to a podcast, you know, actually being a listener of the podcast is a tremendous boon.
Why don't we review a game? You leap in first, Erik.
All right, I mentioned this at the beginning of the episode. It's a Kickstarter coming out July 10th called Pigskin, and normally we don't do a whole lot of Kickstarters, but again, the author is a listener of the show, so I certainly am more interested in that, and it's he did a good production here. So what it's ideally is a 2-player card game with a football theme, although it can play solitaire and can also play 3 or 4 players as well.
Well, does it play well solitaire? Because I'm going to guess that's how you got it to the table.
No, I have played it 2-player. I haven't actually played it solitaire yet. The solitaire rules are fine, but they're not exciting, and so I haven't jumped in to do it 1-player.
Oh, okay. Well, surprises every day. And this is Pigskin by whom?
Roar Games.
All right, and how did we know that they're actually a listener to the show?
Because when they wrote a letter about this, they sent us an email about something unrelated, or actually slightly related, but they sent a letter and actually referenced my love of Firefly in it, and so that makes it obvious that I listened to at least one episode, and that's much better than, because I can't tell you how many emails we get that is so blatantly a copy-paste job of, you know, insert On Board Games name and tell me about your Kickstarter.
Oh, we got one of those for a guy who wrote a book about investing in games.
Oh, it was like gameplay and using the...
Don't give up the thing. But yeah, it was obvious a cut and paste thing, so I forwarded it to you.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I saw Firefly in that email, and I said, "Oh, this is not for me. This is just for Erik."
So let me talk about Pigskin.
Please.
It starts off, there's a hand of cards, and in these cards you have your offense, defense, and quarterbacks cards. And what you do is you pick one of them. You get a hand of 5. You pick one, and then you hand the deck off to the other player, and they're doing the same thing. And you keep alternating sort of 7 Wonders style or draft style until you now have a hand of cards. So you know what the total pool is because you can see each other's cards, but you don't necessarily, unless you have a great memory, can remember exactly what cards your opponent has picked. So then you both play a card face down and you flip it over, and there's 3 key pieces of information on the card. The first is a color. The second is if there are any touchdowns scored or lack of touchdowns prevented. And then the third is a special ability. Not all the cards have a special ability. And so you play your card, your opponent plays their card, and you sort of net out the touchdowns. So if my guy has 1 touchdown and my opponent has 2 block touchdowns, then no touchdowns are scored on my side or their side. You keep doing that until you've played 4 of the 5 cards, and then at the end you sort of total up the touchdowns scored, and you will score a certain amount of points for that. Now, each of your cards has a color on it. We'll call it a suit, for lack of a better term. And if you match a suit, then you get a bonus touchdown. So there's not only are there the little abilities, but you're also trying to match the colors.
Oh, okay.
And then finally, you have your special abilities that can give you bonus points or losing points. And those are keyed to the color of the card you previously played as well. So there's a lot of coordination and colors kind of trying to match in this game.
Ooh, we just received another $1 on Patreon. While we were recording this, John Armstrong pledged up for $1. Yay! Thank you, John.
It kind of creeps me out if he's tapped into our recording session.
Yes. So actually, we should do a better job at letting our listeners know that we're paying attention to them paying attention to us, but we'll do that when it's not so hot.
Fair enough.
Right, so continue. Tell me more about Pigskin. Is it fast?
It is fast. It's about a 20-minute game. You just do what I explained, 4 rounds, and then total up the points. Whenever is the most points wins. It's an easy game to understand. There is some pretty decent strategy because you're picking colors, and a lot of the strategy is, do I want to try and score points, or do I want to prevent my opponent, score touchdowns, or do I want to prevent my opponent from scoring touchdowns? Because you usually can't do both. So that you have to kind of see what your opponent's doing and kind of predict what they are doing as well, knowing the pool of cards they had to pick from.
And so you're just trying to pick when you're doing one or the other? And then that way you're like, oh, well, they've pressed so hard. I know they can't actually get a touchdown this turn, so I'm going to try and go for a touchdown, or...
Yeah, you can do that.
I don't see the balance, I guess.
Well, it's an issue of trying to get your colors lined up and your play order lined up to where that you can score more touchdowns than your opponent. I mean, you can go in there with your strategy. You just have to realize that you either are choosing to score or to prevent someone from scoring. So if you're far ahead, then you want to play a lot of prevent scoring and vice versa. But you only have 5 cards, and you're only going to play 4 of them. So your choices are nicely limited.
Well, all right then. So let's get down to what I care about. How does it look?
It's actually pretty good. The game comes with these. Now, this is a prototype copy, so I can't speak for the final copy. But the game comes with these little plastic football tokens for every time you score a touchdown, and then you have some points. And then the cards are all similar, but they're different enough color-wise that they easy to see. But it's a full color side view of a football player, and then the other stuff is easy to read on the band. To be honest with you, the only real quirky part I found about the game is that you're scoring touchdowns, and then if you score the most touchdowns, then you get points. And so you get 3 points. And then the next round goes and you get 3 points. And there's a few other ways to get points. But the touchdowns in and of themselves don't directly correlate to points, except for the fact that you have to have the most. And that's not a big deal. It's really easy to grasp. But I was curious about the ability to use this game, since it's so simple to draw a football fan into playing games that they may not have realized existed. And the goofiness of the scoring where, in my quarter, I'm going to score 3 touchdowns and my opponent will score 1, can be realistic, can not be realistic, and then those trying to turn into points. It creates a little bit of a dichotomy, so I don't think it was going to be as great as of a gateway game as I had kind of hoped it might be when I first looked at the rules.
Well, what if you said that instead of each of these being a quarter in the game, which makes sense on one hand, but you said each of these was a game that you were playing over the course of a season, and those were points towards end of season victory.
Oh yeah, that could certainly work. So like instead of 4, the 4 rounds represent 4 different chunks of the season as opposed to 4 quarters. Yeah. See, boom, instantly fixed.
Yeah. Well, it's nice that I can fix things instead of breaking them. Okay, so that sounds cool. I'm going to talk about a game that's based on a game I didn't originally.